Thank you very much. Markus, before we look into the future, beyond now, I want to take a moment and look back at your own past, because one interesting fact I learned about you is that you were already a little bit ahead of your time when you were about 19, still a student, because that was when you founded your first company. It was a flat sharing service, basically just like Airbnb, long before Airbnb existed, on a very local level, and probably the main reason it didn't get as huge as Airbnb was that there was, at the beginning of the 1990s, a time when there was no platform economy, no internet as we know it today. So I wondered, it seems like back then you already had this founding spirit that you see in a lot of startups today. So what did you learn back then that still helps you today, being the CEO of a corporation like Telefónica Deutschland with over 7,000 employees?
Well, scale matters, as always. At that time, I think it was in the early 90s, I was studying in Munich, and already at that time, it was very difficult to find flats. And to use co-location space, so space that is actually not needed or used, to bring together supply and demand at that point in time was not so easy. So it was nice, it funded my study at that point in time, but without a digital platform to really scale up the business, to have an end-to-end process, as we now see with some bigger companies who stole my idea finally, is key important. So to create impact, I think you need scale. I think that was a key learning.
Today you have scale. When we talked earlier this week, you said something interesting. You said the biggest challenge for you now is not what lies ahead of us. It's not what making the next 5-year plan. You said the biggest challenge currently for you is to manage the now. So how do you do that? How do you manage the now in such uncertain times?
Well, as said, looking into the future is always easy and nice to build 3-year plans with a hockey stick at the end, and then you invest and hope that the business plan works. We have learned in the last 3 years managing the now is a key part, because the disruptions that are coming, they are much coming closer. Size energy prices, size supply, the shortage in supply that we have seen in the last years, but clearly also consumer behavior, concerns about consumers spending services, using our services. So from that level, I think what we clearly learned is using data. I think data is a key source. I became an expert in the spot market on energy prices last year in order to really get to get every wind blow, in order to get the best price, in order to run our network. But that aside, I think managing the now, I think really using the data that we have and taking better and faster decisions. It sounds very trivial, but to get a huge organization to be used, that has used to run from experience, from know-how, from successes that we had in the past, to completely shift into a data-driven company is not so easy. Because you have many people say, I know it better, we have always done it like this, but to have this cultural shift, to get really to a data-driven company, took enormous effort. I think it starts from the top, that also we use our only data, because if we are not a role model, the organization will not follow. So I think to have all kind of data of consumer spend, bad debt ratio, fraud ratio. So I think it's an overall set of data that we currently use, and managing the now, clearly with the disruptions that we have seen in the last 3 years, has become at least 51% of our task.
You briefly mentioned the high energy costs. Our topic today is how to grow in uncertain times, and one of the many uncertainties we currently see is how prices develop. Your company, your industry also suffers from high energy costs. You feel the inflation just like every one of us does. At the same time, you've got an infrastructure that has to transport more and more data, basically, every day, every year. So let me ask you, are the times of cheap cell phone contracts in Germany definitely over? Do we have to pay more?
Well, from my perspective, it's about price value. And I think what we are currently foreseeing is that the mobile data growth, the demand that we have, every 2 years you need the double amount of data that you use today. At the same time, we invest currently per year roughly 1.1, 1.2 billion into our networks. We buy spectrum, we deploy, finally also infrastructure nationwide. So the German networks have improved in the last 5 years significantly. We have now everywhere mobile coverage where we hadn't coverage before. So on that end, we clearly see more for more. So more service, more performance on our side will also relate with slight price increases.
You just mentioned it. You and your competitors are working on expanding the mobile network, introducing also the new standard 5G to more and more places in Germany. You just reached the goal of setting up more than 1,000 new 5G base stations in Germany, just as your two main competitors did as well. And still there are white spots in Germany, especially on the countryside, places where it's hard to make a phone call, not to think of stream a video on your smartphone. Why is it so hard to close these spots, these loopholes?
Well, it needs on the one side, it's a marathon from our perspective. I think we closed in the last 5 years more than 5,000 white spots on our side, and step by step it's getting less. End of 2024, we will have nationwide full coverage. So everywhere we will have coverage. So this is only nearly 2 years from now. But clearly, for example, for a tower in the rural areas, we need 3 years for permissions. The acceptance of technology has increased in Germany. I think also Corona helped us, at least on that front, that the acceptance and the tolerance for new technologies and digitalization has significantly increased. That's on the positive side. But still, we need to convince in sometimes really to build mobile towers. And 3 years is still a long time. There's now, from our perspective, a lot of progress in getting better and faster permissions, because the towers look the same in Bavaria than in Thuringia or in Schleswig-Holstein. So I think we have standards, and I think we also would love to build, as I always say, like Tesla did. We just start to build, we take the risk if we don't get a permission. That could significantly increase the building and the throughput and the velocity in order to increase the building of mobile sites. As said, end of 2024, all white spots will be closed, and we did a tremendous step in the last 5 years to achieve this target.
Okay, and that's a promise. We will hold you to that. 3 years for a cell tower is a lot. I mean, in the last year, we saw that we can build a whole LNG terminal in under a year if we want to. So that kind of sends a message we can if we want to. Do we have to apply this kind of new willpower to other areas, such as digitalization? Do we have to put it higher on the political agenda?
Well, what we have seen is, and I think you all know our mantra is O2 can do, so this can-do spirit that things are possible, we would clearly love to see even more areas, because we have seen if things are really tough, the country can move extremely fast. So this can-do spirit, as we call it internally, to make things happen, go the extra mile, overcome hurdles, also on bureaucracy, really worked out. So clearly on permissions we would need that, but clearly also to build up faster renewable energy. I think we know what to do. I think it's now really make it happen, and now really also to get into execution of many things, because at the end we also know what costs us time. And as said, digitalization is a key part of the solution of our future challenges, especially also on the climate neutrality. If we would digitalize even faster, we could reduce our CO2 emissions by 20% by 2030. So if we really would digitalization put at the heart and at the core of everything we do, there's so much potential in there. So digitalization is part of the solution at that front. So on that level, we would clearly wish for the can-do spirit everywhere.
Okay, there are some politicians in the audience. I think Wolfgang Schmidt is here, who is closely working with Chancellor Olaf Scholz. So this is your chance. What's on your wish list from the government?
Well, from our perspective, and I think it's not a surprise, we don't need any more spectrum auctions in Germany for existing spectrum. That's clearly very important. We would love to invest more into infrastructure and from that level clearly have competition and better infrastructure for the country. For that, Telefónica has really granted national roaming access to the fourth entrant on the one side. We are investing a lot, and clearly we would love to spend significant more money. We spent around 70 billion for auctions for spectrum in the last 20 years. If we would have put the money into infrastructure, we all would have great fiber at the home. We would have not 6G because it's not available, but 5G everywhere. So on that level, there's a lot of lessons learned for our new government now, not to do the same mistakes from the past and really extend spectrum and have broader and better rollout conditions. That's our offer, to have 5G everywhere in Germany as quickly as possible. But clearly, it doesn't cost the government so much, but on the other side, really to foster investments. I think that's a clear wish that we have, and we clearly hope that we can convince with our arguments.
Okay, there's another important topic, one of many important topics for the government this year, and that is how to deal with China. The government is working on a new strategy, how to deal with China. It's also a very important topic for you because your infrastructure contains equipment from Huawei, as we know, a huge Chinese company. Do you need clearer guidance on that, or would you wish you have clearer rules?
Well, from a technological standpoint, I think we also need competition. We need competition between companies, between countries. So on that level, we clearly see from a technological point, we also see that the Chinese infrastructure performs very well. But we clearly need guidance. If we take further investments, what's the role? For example, for our network, we use in our core network, in a very sensitive part, we work with Ericsson. We have 50% allocated to Nokia, a European company, and 50% of the radio, of the antennas, to a Chinese vendor. So on that level, we clearly need clarity and guidance. I think the process is now clear. I think it's a trust-based implementation that we currently do. But clearly, from our perspective, we need global competition, and we also need global supply. We will not be able to build everything here in Germany. We all know that key parts of our smartphones, they're all built around the world. We work in global supply chains. So also on that level, I do not believe that we will be able to break up global supply chains.
There's one topic that is currently being discussed in Brussels that would be a game changer for your company, your industry, and that is, some call it a data toll, you call it an OTT fair share contribution. Sounds complicated, but what is meant is a fee for companies such as Google or Meta who basically use your infrastructure for free. Like Netflix can only offer us their streaming service because we've got access to internet that you provide. So Netflix obviously doesn't want to pay such a new fee. How do you convince them? What's your argument?
Well, if we look at the traffic forecast, we see that some services that are produced in the metaverse would increase the data usage by times 10. And that means that we also need to multiply our capacity investments. Currently, we do not have a fair level playing field because clearly the value creation, the revenues and the profits are made outside Europe. But in order to provide these services, we need the best-in-class infrastructure for Europe. So I think now is the time to discuss how could a fair contribution, especially of the extremely high traffic demanding services, look like in order to deploy the capacity investments. Because networks are not God-given. So if we need to deploy 10 times more capacity, I think we also need to have a talk, how can we finance them and how can we make a great networks experiences for all services. And we believe there's a good argument here to come to fair and good conclusions because currently it doesn't look like a fair level playing field. And this is why it's now the time to have this discussion in order to get to a good conclusion so that we have great services but also great networks in the future.
We talked about big tech. Are you afraid that the coming metaverse will be ruled by tech companies from the US, or do you still see a chance that we could build a European metaverse instead?
Well, the question is, what is the metaverse per se? I think it's a question of definition. The content that is relevant for the metaverse, what people are interested, sits in Europe. It's about the sports, it's about the entertainment, it's about the music, it's about the culture. So on our perspective, we have a good chance to also find our own way to the metaverse and not to wait that somebody shows us the way. At the end, it's not about just only building a marketplace where some companies earn a lot of money. It's about really creating a new vision how to consume culture, music, sports, entertainment. And from that level, with our possibilities also to clearly have a value-driven approach on data protection, what we want to see, what we do not want to see on the net, and especially in the Web 3.0, I think we have a good chance. And I'm sure we will find our own way for the metaverse. It's not exclusive. I think it should be open for everyone. But if we're really honest, the values that we have here in Europe, everybody wants to live under these values, and we have the content. And it's not, the platform cost is not a limiting factor in these days. is about really the content that matters. And this is why I'm sure that we will find our own answer for the metaverse in the future. Real-time translation, and also what we have seen at the CES in Las Vegas, is becoming now a reality. And this is clearly what currently we lack in Europe. We do not have a joint language. But if you can, for example, talk to a Portuguese colleague in real time, and it really makes a difference. So real-time translation will also unite Europe more and give us the chance to really also build our own digital sovereign platforms.
Okay, so thank you very much. Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.